Hi everyone, and welcome to our next generation webinar series. So this is the webinar series that follows the recent events we've just completed around the country. So if you attended, then you will have seen the content already. If you haven't, then great, and if you want to share it with some of your peers, then you're more than welcome to. For this webinar, I'm going to be covering the managing operational big data topic that we covered at the event, which is around collect, clarify, and close the loop. My name's Andy Graham, and I'm the Wonderware Product Manager at Solutions PT. So if we look at an agenda for this webinar, we are going to start with the market trends. Then we're going to go into a bit about Connect. So it's not strictly collect, clarify, and close the loop. It's always important for us to include a bit about how we connect to the devices at the bottom level, and then we're going to start to go into how we store that data and how we analyze and transform that data into meaningful, actionable information. So in terms of the market trends, there was a study that was carried out by the IDC back in only September last year, so it's quite a recent survey, and they asked some of these typical questions that you might have seen previously, things like, have you heard about digital transformation? And 100% of people there said yes. If we asked then and delved in further about, are people familiar with the terms of things like IoT? 49% of people claimed they knew something about it, and only 12% had heard of the term but didn't really know much about it. There were some people there that had plans to implement an IoT solution in the next 12 months, 44%, and then if you branch it out into a bit further time frame, the number reduced. But then if we move on a little bit further than that, and the topic moved on to the top 3 expectations that you'd expect to get from it, and these are probably not something that is groundbreaking for you or something that you've not heard before. So the reason that we implement these types of solutions is mainly to get things like productivity gains. How do we get more throughput? What does it reduce operating costs? We need to make sure we see that return on investment if we're implementing a solution like this. But there's also in there a bit about creating a holistic process automation approach, making sure we're pulling all that information together into a single software vendor, or just a single piece of software or a software brand that allows you to reduce that knowledge gap required to be able to move between pieces of software. So that was interesting. But then if we move on to this part, and this is quite big really. And this is really my personal opinion of what I've always thought about how IoT is going to help the industry. The idea is that it'll complement big data and big data analytics, being able to action more and do more with our data. And they expect that this activity could be worth about $500 billion by 2020. So we're talking huge sums of money here. They did continue with this survey, and they did say that the factory of the future would be automation intensive. So there'd be less manual processes on the shop floor, less writing things down on paper. But in saying that, it would still be very people intensive. So it's not a case that they're removing all that manual work from the shop floor, but because our automation processes will become more complex, we're going to really need to have that expertise in our operators and engineers to be able to make the right decisions based on the complexity to deliver better business value. So it still has to be people intensive. And it will be IT intensive, and we've started to see this more as we've gone along. The IT and the OT networks used to be completely disjointed. We've started to see a shift in terms of that, especially when you start to move to things like the cloud or software as a service type installations, because we require those outside connections to be able to get that data up to that cloud interface, or even some of the real-time data up there. So we are, and we're going to see more IT intensive types of factories, and certainly the bigger organizations the IT teams are very much involved, because they're the guys that set up, the server infrastructures and even implement the networks in some cases. There's a few IoT from the survey in terms of must-dos and opportunities. So the must-dos are things like standardization, needs to be able to integrate well, and you've got to be able to connect to them. There's going to be always a way of just purchasing the cheapest device, and that'll always be the temptation. There's going to be smaller sensors and smaller devices coming on the market all the time, so that takes you away from that standardization then. And then you've got to go back through that integration and connect type phase to make sure you can still connect to those details. Standardize on the same protocol, standardize on similar devices, and they're the real must-dos for that. And then in terms of opportunities, it's around some of the same stuff we've already talked about, but it's also going to increase people capabilities. We're getting more data, so it allows us to do more analysis on that information. So our people will become more rich in what they can do, and the business decisions they can make on the system. It'll increase the ownership naturally in terms of that, and then that sustainable step change in performance, so similar to what we saw before in terms of the expectations that we'd expect to get from a system like this. So then if we move into some of the product stuff, so here we're doing the connect, collect, clarify and close the loop. And starting with connect, and it's only a single slide just to show that, and if you're familiar with Wonderware, that we connect to anything, and we have done since InTouch was first introduced. That is not changing. In fact, they've expanded it even further. So we now have something called an OI gateway. It replaces FS gateway, and this also introduces something called MQTT, which is message queue telemetry transfer. It's a new protocol that is starting to emerge in the IoT space. And what that deals with are very low-powered, low amounts of data being transferred over typically disparate assets. So you could now put sensors on things like mobile assets and get data straight through our driver into a cloud environment, as an example. So you can do the analysis on that product. You could bring it into your real-time system as well. You probably notice a change in the name, or you might do, in terms of OI. That stands for Operations Integration. So they were originally I/O servers, and they moved to and then DA servers, data access service, and then onto operations integration. So we're doing much more than just connecting to PLCs at the bottom end now. We're connecting to a whole range of different devices and things across the stack. And it works with all, or certainly the majority of the Wonderware products out there. And then if we look at the collection of that data, and typically we'd use our historian for this. Now, I'm not going to go over a detailed overview of what our historian is, because you will have probably seen this before, but just as headline figures, our historian is a high-performance real-time database. It's built on top of some Microsoft core technology in terms of SQL Server, but it isn't a relational database. It doesn't store all those values just into a database system, because that would actually be a very slow system. It stores in history blocks at the back end. It's a complete management solution. So a lot of people say that the plants are effectively running blind without being able to store and analyze that data. And this allows us to do that. And when we talk about high performance, we're talking sustainable rates of 200,000 points a second that this can store. So it's extremely large. It's accessible. You can have it distributed and scalable. It works with all the OI drivers or DA servers that you've used previously in terms of open connectivity. And it is an easy-to-use product. And if you integrate it as part of a management solution into something like System Platform, because it comes with that solution, it's a case of ticking boxes to store that your PLC data straight to that historian interface. But then if we move on, and things have changed since the original historian release, they're obviously improving things as they go along, and I'll talk a bit more about that later on. But if we move on to something in terms of distributed architectures, this is something that isn't new to Wonderware. And if we look at a distributed geoscada as an example, we've perhaps got data being collected all over the country or even all over the world and reporting back to a centralized historian. And we do have installations of this in the UK, worldwide as well, and it allows us to analyze the data from multiple sites effectively. The IoT space and the sensors are only taking that one step further because we can put small sensors or low-powered, low-cost sensors into places which we could probably never reach in the past, and get that data back to a centralized historian. The difference is that we have more flexibility in that. So with historian, and this is something that's been around for a while in terms of distribution, we've got tiered architectures. So you could have historians at multiple sites. You could introduce a centralized location for a historian, perhaps a head office, replicate all of your data back to that central historian for that analysis of data. So it doesn't have to be the real-time geoscada system you saw previously. It could all be historical data reporting back centrally. And again, that's not something that's that new. What is fairly new to the solution stack is the Wonderware Online system, and this is what we're going to talk about in a bit more detail. So if we have a quick look at the architecture that you see here, our online insight, our cloud in that central area that you see there, that is our historian. So it's the same technology, it just sits on the Microsoft Azure cloud platform. And then what that means then is we can collect data from multiple locations, and you see a whole host of types of SCADA applications and different sources at the bottom end there. So we are obviously, or Wonderware is now part of Schneider, so it also incorporates SciTech. SCADA, there's native connections to there. You can get data from your historian and InTouch as you'd expect. InTouch Machine Edition, which is your lower cost HMI, but even things like Clay SCADA, because it is that Schneider brand that is enabling this. And then once it's in there, it's about getting that data to more people through simpler and easier to use casual user interfaces. But what I really want to focus on here is a bit about these two on the left-hand side. So in terms of OPC and the OI server that goes along with it, because we do have an installation out there at the moment that talks to this. And the way that works is we've actually got a map of the world here, and we have a customer in the UK. They have multiple PLCs around the world in sites that they've recently acquired, so they don't actually have a great understanding of what's happening at each site. They've installed a OI server to communicate to that PLC, and then something which is a very lightweight piece of software from the Wonderware Online Insight package called the Historian Publisher, and this deals with the store and forward of data back up to that cloud environment. So if you lose any of your internet connection, it will buffer that data until that connection is back available again. And once it's in there, it's about getting the data out to more people, as I've mentioned, in a multitude of ways. So it might be via the casual user interface in terms of the Insight application, which I'll show you shortly. It might be the thick client in terms of historian client that you'd want to use to return that data, or it might be something as small as a native mobile application in SmartGlance. And then the next one that I wanted to just talk about is a bit about MQTT, and this is something that we've set up as a pilot in our offices. So what we have is a small Raspberry Pi. For those of you that don't know what that is, it's just a very small computer. It's only about 30 or 40 pounds. And then we've got a temperature sensor which is connected directly to the I/O ports on it, which is, again, a very similar cost. And we are using here the MQTT protocol through what we call a broker. So in this case, we're using a freeware broker called Mosquito, and that translates the data from the Raspberry Pi that it's receiving the temperature sensor data into the MQTT, so it can be pushed out and returned through our OI server so that we can either get it straight up to that cloud environment I've just mentioned, or even to a real-time system like something like System Platform or InTouch. We do have many possibilities with that. And then it's about the right tool in terms of the information client or how we present that data, the right tool for the job. InTouch is probably one that is a little bit overlooked quite a lot of the time. There's some really nice functions and features that are built into the orchestra graphics inside of there that allow you to get aggregated data from your historian into that environment. So it could be the max value over a period of time, or it could be the average value over a period of time, and you can specify what that is. So you can create some nice dashboards to display that, and that's really as real time as you're going to get for a historical system anyway. The historian client is an obvious one, and this is really to look at the data on a very granular level. So your operators might like to see exactly what happened at a particular point in time. I'm going to talk more about the intelligence and the online and smart Gantt solutions shortly, but also something that people potentially don't know we have in our product stack is something like Alarm Advisor. Alarm Advisor is an out-of-the-box product that analyzes your alarms to tell you where the problems lie inside of them. So it won't resolve them for you, but what it will do is identify where the issues are so you can go into your SCADA system and reduce them. And by reducing your alarms, you're going to increase your operator efficiency and your operator awareness, because you're going to have less alarms to deal with. But if we start with, or go into more depth in terms of the online solution, and I've already mentioned a bit about the use of this using the Historian product. It is our Historian product in the cloud. If you wanted to try this out, you can certainly do that by going to online.wonderware.com, and you can sign up. You can start to use it within 10 minutes. It's really a very simple process. They've also branched out into making sure there's an EU data center available now. So if you wanted to store your data only in the EU, if you go to online.wonderware.eu, you can also do that and sign up to that site instead. It may work for you in terms of data integrity, because of the differences in laws between the States and the EU. But what does it mean? What do we get? So we store that data, and then we get this out-of-the-box client interface, this casual user where we don't have to know all the tag names, everything associated with our data. It's an interface which is designed very similar to what we see in our day-to-day lives. So the content changes in the middle, and everything around the outside we can manipulate to change that data. It also has a very simple search for that user. So like I mentioned, you don't need to know the tag names, and that's very much the case. So you can type in engineering units, you can type in something that exists in the comment field of that tag, and it will bring back results for you, so you can pop them on the screen. So there's no real training course required for having a look at and manipulating the data that exists in that environment. This is just a short video that shows you a complete Wonderware Online end-to-end solution. So it's going to show you, in the first instance here, it shows us a real-time SCADA. It's just our InTouch application. And at the moment, it's just displaying real-time temperature data around the US. So we can have a look at that. And then what we're going to do is install the Historian Publisher, which is this lightweight application. And this is how we publish this data to the online environment. So it'll ask us to sign in. We sign in with our username and password credentials for our Online Insight website. We give our application a name to tell it what to call it. And it is now publishing the values to the Historian online. We're now going to look at the casual user interface I just mentioned, and we're going to start by putting in a temperature tag that exists as part of that SCADA, because it's now storing the data. And it will automatically try and manipulate the data in a way that's meaningful. So it automatically chooses a summary chart in this instance. We're going to change it to a line chart so it makes a bit more sense. We can obviously change things like the time at the bottom there. And we're going to now just add another tag to that, another temperature tag to that trend. So we can see that in there. So we've got both of our tags on the screen. Complete history of it. And we also have the ability to change, again, manipulate the data in multiple ways. So we change to a column chart. We're also now showing the maximum value per day. And once we've got the data that we like, we go to the share button at the bottom, and there's multiple things you can do with that share button. But in this case, we're going to save it for displaying that content on our mobile device. So we're just saving that data, and what we're going to do is show you the Smart Glance interface, the mobile application that is native to it. So it's downloadable via the app stores, and when we go in there, we can see our chart that exists, and we can select the two tags and have a look at that same data just in my mobile device instead. What's also clever with this is that we can set up alerts. So these are push notifications based on exceeding certain thresholds that we know are going to be, we need to action. They've also introduced a news data feed, if you like, which is simple anomaly detection. So it looks for outliers in the data and just points that out to you. Quite a neat feature. And then we'll see the push notification come through on that device. So we could click on it and look at it in more detail, or log on to our online insight application if we wanted to. In terms of the development cycle of online insight, or the hosted solution, because it's hosted in the cloud, it allows Wonderware to provide updates without having to release a completely new installed package. Because that client interface is HTML5 driven and there's no installation at the client level, it means it's a much more scalable platform. So we're starting to see updates coming on really like a quarterly basis. And some of the latest ones are expanded pan and zoom capabilities that were released in January. I think there's been some more since then actually. But what this allows you to do is pan and zoom throughout the trend details. And if you are on a tablet or looking at it on a touchscreen device, you could pinch and zoom to zoom into that same environment. It's quite a neat way to navigate, a much more intuitive way to do that. They've also introduced Gantt Charts, so it allows us to mix and match the tags, and they have expanded this one further actually by including more than just discrete tags. You can now see things like string tags on the same charts as well. So what this does is, if we went to a line chart of our data, we could also include the discrete tag at the bottom, because if that was like to say our device is running or stopped, we can very quickly see from that discrete tag that it is stopped, and that's the reason why we're seeing the dips in the trends. We can just get confirmation from that. A very useful feature to have Gantt charts in the same environment. This is going to look at how our historian has come on. So although, yes, we do have a quicker development cycle for our online product, in terms of our local on-premise solution, the 2017 release has also introduced some quite dramatic improvements in terms of the retrieval mode. So we can see here, we're looking at the old version at the moment, the 2014 R2, and looking at a day was very quick, returning that data. 2 weeks is still pretty quick, we're looking at 3 seconds to return that. And then we look at 3 months, and this is where we then start to have to wait. So this is the 2017 release, which came out last month. So it was the middle of last month this came out, so it's available for download. And it took nearly 16 seconds to return that data. And this is replicated through to the Insight interface that you see. So the online Insight, there is actually an on-premise solution for Insight. Obviously, it doesn't go through the same development that the online version does, because they have to release full products for that. The 2017 release does expand it and it's brought it closer to the online version. But yeah, it took actually slightly longer at 17 seconds. Then if we look at the 2017 release and how this has changed, we look at a day and it's very quick as you'd expect. Then look at a couple of weeks, it's almost instant. We're now going to look at 3 months, and again we can't even, it's updated very, very quickly. In less than a second, and we're now going to change it to a year, and even that updates in less than a second. And we can even zoom in to look at the data at a more granular level here. So you see it's zoomed in very quickly, and we can continue to zoom in that case too. So some dramatic changes to the improvement in the retrieval speed of the historian, and this is replicated through to the Insight client. So you can see our data appearing there, and that's a year's worth of data. If we then move on to one of our other information clients in terms of Wonderware Intelligence, and so this just takes it slightly further. So if, for instance, the Insight client isn't feature-rich enough because it's only looking at your process data, you need to correlate your information or your data with external factors. So you might have to correlate it with the shift patterns or the weather outside as an example. If you want to do something like that, then you need to move to a solution that allows you to do that, build that data warehouse that is required to be able to perform the real root cause analysis on those external factors. And intelligence is that product for that. So it will retrieve your process data from your historian, but if you want to, like I say, ask questions of that data, like how much does it cost me to, in energy as an example, to produce this product over this period of time or this batch, intelligence is really the way to go with something like that. It's actually quite complex in the way that you have to pull that data in, and intelligence simplifies that by creating its own data warehouse. And then lastly, if we just have a look at the close the loop element, and in this case what we're referring to here is really a workflow, so business process management. Business process management is effectively putting like a paper on glass type system. So if you are working in the plant environment and you're looking to make those continuous improvements as an example, you might write down things on paper as to the changes that you make, or you might not even do that. You might just, based on somebody's knowledge, just make those changes, and you expect that same person or the same group of people to remember what's happened, and they sort of get a feel for the way that things work rather than really looking at the data. So what business process management allows you to do is, I suppose, create an electronic copy of those changes that you're making so that you can continue to make those continuous improvements around your plant, but you can justify and understand the reasons why that happened, because you can make a note and you can log the changes that you did make, and that then closes that loop because you can start the process all over again once you've done that, and you can go back through analysing that data, and then you can re-log all the changes that you make to see how that then affects the business. So it's just a continued process, and the Wonderware Skelta BPM product is something that is highly integrated into the product stack. So if you're using something like System Platform, it's a great way of doing that. So then I just want to summarise and finish on the challenges. And normally the challenges are at the beginning, but I thought what I'd do is go through the presentation and then read these out, and hopefully you'll agree that these have all been covered. So now that the cost of connectivity has fallen, how do we cost effectively connect to these devices? Well, hopefully you've seen that the way that we always expand our connectivity offering, we can always connect to the latest devices, even as something as small as these IoT devices and sensors that are coming out onto the market. Then after we've done that, how do we store that data, and how do we process it? Because it could be very unstructured. especially from disparate data sources and different devices. Well, our Historian is a more than capable product, and by expanding that out into the cloud environment, that allows us to make it even more distributed, get data from anywhere in the world very, very simply, and make it available to everybody straight away. And after we've stored that, how do we give it meaningful business context? How do we analyze it? And we've got multiple packages that allow us to do that, from the simple process data type packages like the Insight client, like Smart Glance, to react to problems quickly if you need to, up to something like intelligence, and then closing that business loop through business process management. So these are some of the common challenges and how we are addressing them. And then all that's left is just to say thank you for joining, or thank you for downloading the webinar, and look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you.